4:07 p.m. on September 6, 1901, at the Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. President William McKinley stands in the Temple of Music, an ornate concert hall built specifically for the World's Fair, shaking hands with a long line of well-wishers. The 58-year-old president is in excellent spirits, having just delivered a speech about American prosperity and international cooperation. He has no idea that standing in the reception line, just a few people away, is a 28-year-old anarchist named Leon Czolgosz with a loaded .32 caliber revolver hidden beneath a handkerchief wrapped around his right hand. In the next few seconds, 2 shots will ring out across the music hall. One bullet will bounce off McKinley's button, but the second will tear through his stomach, beginning a week-long ordeal that will end with the president's death and mark the climax of what historians call the first wave of modern terrorism. Here is how it unfolded. By the time this video is published, over 120 years have passed since that autumn afternoon in Buffalo. But the McKinley assassination represents a crucial turning point in American history, the moment when anarchist terrorism, which had been ravaging Europe for 2 decades, finally reached the highest office in the United States and forever changed how America protects its presidents. It's the height of the Pan-American Exposition, a massive World's Fair showcasing technological progress and international cooperation at the dawn of the 20th century. The exposition covers 350 acres of Buffalo's Delaware Park, featuring elaborate buildings, exotic exhibits, and the newly developed electric lighting that illuminates the fairgrounds at night, earning it the nickname the City of Light. President McKinley has been reluctant to attend the exposition at all. His wife Ida suffers from epilepsy and various health problems that require constant attention, and McKinley is extremely protective of her. But political advisors convince him that appearing at the exposition is important for his presidency and for promoting American achievements abroad. The visit is scheduled for 2 days, September 5th for a major speech on trade and international relations, and September 6th for a public reception where ordinary citizens can meet and shake hands with the president. This kind of direct public access is still common in 1901, though it makes security officials nervous given the wave of anarchist assassinations sweeping through Europe. Between 1892 and 1901, anarchists have assassinated the President of France, the Empress of Austria, the King of Italy, and numerous other high-ranking officials across Europe. The so-called propaganda of the deed, the anarchist belief that spectacular acts of violence will inspire revolutionary consciousness in the masses, has created an atmosphere of fear and paranoia among world leaders. American newspapers have been filled with warnings about the anarchist threat for weeks before McKinley's visit to Buffalo. Editorials thunder about political refugees and asylum seekers, demanding that these national pests be deported before they can carry out attacks on American soil. The warnings prove tragically prescient. Leon Czolgosz is the son of Polish immigrants, born in Detroit and raised in poverty in industrial cities across the Midwest. He works as a factory labourer, enduring brutal conditions and low wages that breed resentment against the capitalist system. By his mid-20s, Czolgosz has become radicalized by anarchist literature and speeches, particularly those of Emma Goldman, the charismatic speaker sometimes called the Queen of Anarchism in the American press. Goldman preaches a philosophy of individual action against oppressive systems. The masses are a problem, she declares. They cling to their masters, love the whip. This contempt for ordinary working people leads anarchists to embrace terrorism as a shortcut to revolution. Rather than building mass movements, they believe a few dramatic assassinations will awaken revolutionary consciousness. Czolgosz attends one of Goldman's speeches in Cleveland in May 1901 and becomes obsessed with proving himself worthy of the anarchist cause. But there's a problem. Established anarchists suspect Czolgosz of being a police infiltrator or agent provocateur. His questions are too direct, his eagerness too obvious, his understanding of anarchist philosophy too shallow. An anarchist newspaper even publishes a warning: the attention of the comrades is called to another spy. He is well dressed, of medium height, rather narrow-shouldered, blonde, and about 25 years of age. He is given his name as Fred C. Nieman. This individual has of late been observed at the meetings. Comrades are warned to be on their guard. The warning describes Czolgosz perfectly. He has been using the alias Fred Nieman, German for nobody, at anarchist gatherings. Humiliated and desperate to prove he's not a spy, Czolgosz decides he must do something dramatic, something that will prove his commitment to the anarchist cause beyond any doubt. Take a look at what happened in the days before the assassination. In late August 1901, Czolgosz reads newspaper accounts of President McKinley's planned visit to the Pan-American Exposition. He sees his opportunity. If he can assassinate the President of the United States, the anarchists will have to acknowledge him as a true believer, a hero of the movement. Czolgosz travels to Buffalo and checks into a cheap boarding house under his real name. He purchases a .32 caliber Ivor Johnson revolver, another Saturday night special, like the one used to shoot President Garfield 20 years earlier. He visits the exposition grounds multiple times, studying the layout and McKinley's schedule. On September 5th, Czolgosz attends McKinley's speech but can't get close enough for an attempt. The security is too tight with guards surrounding the president on the outdoor platform, but Czolgosz learns that the next day, McKinley will hold a public reception at the Temple of Music where anyone can approach him and shake his hand. This will be Czolgosz's chance. September 6th dawns hot and humid, with temperatures climbing into the 80s by afternoon. The Temple of Music is a temporary structure built for the exposition, featuring a grand organ and elaborate interior decorations. It's designed to hold concerts and cultural events, but today it serves as the venue for the president's meet and greet with the public. McKinley's security detail is concerned about the event. Secret Service agents and local police worry about the president's safety in such an exposed setting, but McKinley insists on going through with the reception. "No one would wish to hurt me," he tells his personal secretary, George Cortelyou, who has tried multiple times to cancel the event. The reception begins at 4 p.m. A line of people stretches through the Temple of Music and out into the fairgrounds. Thousands of ordinary citizens waiting for their brief moment to meet the president. McKinley stands near the center of the hall, flanked by Secret Service agents and Buffalo police detectives. His private secretary Cortelyou stands to his left, along with exposition officials and local dignitaries. The security arrangements are minimal by modern standards. Guards watch the crowd but don't search anyone or screen for weapons. The assumption is that the dense crowd itself provides some protection. How could anyone pull out a weapon without being noticed immediately? Czolgosz joins the reception line around 4 p.m, positioning himself strategically to ensure he'll reach McKinley during the busiest part of the reception, when guards might be less alert. He wraps his right hand in a white handkerchief as if protecting an injury, with his loaded revolver concealed beneath the cloth. The bandaged hand doesn't attract any suspicion. Several other people in line have handkerchiefs to wipe sweat in the oppressive heat. As Czolgosz slowly moves forward in the line, his heart pounds, but his face remains calm. He watches McKinley greeting each person warmly, shaking hands, exchanging brief pleasantries. The president seems genuinely happy to meet ordinary citizens, his round face beaming with satisfaction. Among those in the reception line and scattered through the crowd is an unlucky witness to presidential tragedy. Robert Todd Lincoln, son of Abraham Lincoln, and now serving as McKinley's Secretary of War. Lincoln has the grim distinction of being present at 3 of the 4 presidential assassinations in American history. At his father's deathbed in 1865, witnessing Garfield's shooting in 1881, and now standing just feet away as McKinley is about to be shot. At 4:07 p.m, Leon Czolgosz reaches the front of the line. McKinley extends his right hand for the customary handshake, smiling warmly at the young man before him. Czolgosz raises his bandaged right hand as if to shake, but instead of grasping the president's hand, he pushes it aside and thrusts the handkerchief-wrapped revolver directly into McKinley's torso. 2 shots explode in rapid succession, the muffled reports slightly deadened by the handkerchief, but still clearly audible across the hall. The first bullet strikes one of McKinley's coat buttons and ricochets off, tearing through his jacket but causing no injury. The second bullet penetrates his abdomen just below the sternum, tearing through his stomach, pancreas, and left kidney before lodging in the muscles of his back. McKinley staggers backward, his face going pale with shock. "Am I shot?" he asks quietly, almost calmly, as he begins to fall. Secret Service agents and police immediately swarm Czolgosz, knocking him to the ground and pummeling him with fists. The crowd erupts in chaos, people screaming and pushing toward the exits. "Go easy on him, boys," McKinley says as he's lowered to a chair, watching the beating Czolgosz is receiving. Even mortally wounded, the president's first instinct is compassion and concern that the mob might kill his attacker. As McKinley slumps in the chair, his first thought is for his epileptic wife. "My wife," he murmurs to Cortelyou. "Be careful how you tell her." Oh, be careful. This concern for Ida's fragile health even as his own life drains away, exemplifies the devotion that defined their marriage. Secret Service agents quickly improvise a stretcher from chairs and carry McKinley to an emergency hospital hastily set up on the exposition grounds. The president remains conscious and remarkably composed during the transport, though he's obviously in severe pain. Blood soaks through his white vest and shirt as doctors prepare for emergency surgery. Meanwhile, police drag Czolgosz to a detention room where they begin a brutal interrogation. Buffalo detectives pummel him with fists and clubs, demanding to know if he's part of a larger conspiracy. Czolgosz admits almost immediately that he's an anarchist who acted alone, but his captors don't believe him. "I killed President McKinley because I done my duty," Czolgosz tells them flatly. "I didn't believe one man should have so much service and another man should have none." When asked about his motives, he shows no remorse, no emotion, only the cold certainty of a true believer. Take a look at what happened during the emergency surgery. The exposition's makeshift hospital is woefully inadequate for treating a gunshot wound to the abdomen, one of the most dangerous injuries possible in 1901. The chief surgeon available is Dr. Matthew Mann, a gynecologist with no experience treating gunshot wounds. Dr. Mann operates under terrible conditions. The hospital has no surgical lights, so doctors work in the fading afternoon sun streaming through windows. When darkness falls, they use a pan to reflect sunlight, and later resort to using the dim electric lights available at the exposition. The operating theatre is sweltering in the September heat, and flies buzz around the open wound as doctors work. Mann opens McKinley's abdomen and finds the entry wound in his stomach. He repairs the holes in both the front and back walls of the stomach and cleans the wound as best he can. But he cannot find the bullet. It has lodged somewhere deep in McKinley's back, and probing for it would cause more damage than leaving it in place. This is a crucial decision point. 20 years earlier, the repeated probing for the bullet killed President Garfield through massive infection. Mann decides not to make the same mistake. He'll leave the bullet where it is and hope McKinley can survive with it in his body. It seems like the right choice, based on recent medical thinking, but it will prove fatal. What Mann cannot know is that the bullet has torn through McKinley's pancreas, causing damage that will eventually kill him. The pancreas secretes digestive enzymes, and when damaged, these enzymes begin digesting the body's own tissues. But in 1901, doctors don't fully understand pancreatic function, and the technology to diagnose internal organ damage doesn't exist. After the surgery, McKinley is transported to the home of John Milburn, president of the Pan-American Exposition, where he'll recuperate in more comfortable surroundings than the exposition hospital. Initial reports are cautiously optimistic. The president survived the surgery and seems to be recovering. For the first few days, McKinley appears to improve. His pulse is strong, his temperature normal, his appetite returning. Doctors issue bulletins stating that the president is doing well and that his recovery seems assured. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt, who rushed to Buffalo after the shooting, is told the crisis has passed and departs to join his family on vacation in the Adirondack Mountains. But McKinley's apparent improvement is an illusion. Inside his body, the damaged pancreas is destroying tissue and causing gangrene to spread through his abdomen. The bullet wound itself is healing, but the unseen pancreatic damage is slowly killing him. By September 12th, 6 days after the shooting, McKinley's condition begins to deteriorate rapidly. His pulse becomes weak and erratic, his temperature spikes, he can't keep down food and begins vomiting. The doctors realize something is terribly wrong, but they don't know what. They administer stimulants and try different treatments, but nothing helps. McKinley is dying, and there's nothing they can do to save him. Ida McKinley maintains a constant vigil at her husband's bedside, her own fragile health forgotten in her grief. McKinley, even in his final hours, tries to comfort her. On the evening of September 13th, as his condition worsens, he takes Ida's hand and begins humming her favourite hymn, "Nearer my God to thee." "Goodbye, all goodbye," McKinley whispers to those gathered around his bed. It is God's way. His will be done, not ours. At 2:15 a.m. on September 14th, 1901, 8 days after being shot, President William McKinley dies from gangrene caused by the damaged pancreas. He's 58 years old. Theodore Roosevelt is hiking in the Adirondacks when a messenger reaches him with news of McKinley's death. He makes a harrowing nighttime journey down the mountain and races by train to Buffalo. where he's sworn in as the 26th President of the United States at 3:30 p.m. on September 14th. At 42, Roosevelt becomes the youngest president in American history, thrust into office by an anarchist's bullet. The autopsy on McKinley confirms what doctors suspected: massive gangrene throughout his abdomen caused by the pancreatic injury. The bullet itself, still lodged in his back muscles, had nothing to do with his death. If modern surgical techniques and antibiotics had been available, McKinley almost certainly would have survived. Leon Czolgosz shows no remorse for the assassination. During his interrogation and trial, he remains coldly defiant, insisting he did his duty by killing a representative of oppression. "I don't believe in the Republican form of government," he tells prosecutors, "and I don't believe we should have any rulers." The trial begins on September 23rd, just 9 days after McKinley's death. It lasts only 8.5 hours, the fastest major criminal trial in American history. Czolgosz refuses to cooperate with his court-appointed attorneys, won't enter a plea, and sits silently through most of the proceedings. The evidence is overwhelming. Dozens of witnesses saw Czolgosz shoot the president. He admitted the crime immediately and never recanted. His attorneys try to argue insanity, but Czolgosz angrily rejects this defense. He wants to be recognized as a political assassin, not dismissed as a madman. The jury deliberates for just 34 minutes before returning a guilty verdict. Czolgosz is sentenced to death in the electric chair at Auburn State Prison in upstate New York. Throughout the trial and sentencing, he shows no emotion, no regret, only the blank expression of a true believer convinced of his righteousness. On October the 29th, 1901, less than 2 months after shooting McKinley, Leon Czolgosz is executed. His last words are, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the working people. I am not sorry for my crime." After the execution, prison officials pour sulfuric acid over Czolgosz's body in the coffin to dissolve it, ensuring that no grave or remains can become a shrine for anarchist sympathizers. His personal effects are burned. The authorities want to erase every trace of the assassin from history. The assassination of President McKinley triggers a massive crackdown on anarchists across the United States. Police raid anarchist meeting halls, newspapers, and suspected safe houses. Hundreds of anarchists are arrested, interrogated, and in many cases deported. Emma Goldman, despite having no involvement in the plot, is arrested and held for weeks before being released for lack of evidence. Congress passes new immigration laws specifically targeting anarchists. The Immigration Act of 1903 explicitly bans anarchists from entering the United States and allows for the deportation of anarchist immigrants. It's the first time American law excludes people based on their political beliefs rather than nationality or health. President Theodore Roosevelt proposes even harsher measures, calling for all anarchists to be sent back to their countries of origin, regardless of how long they've lived in America. His successor, Woodrow Wilson, actually attempts to deport hundreds of anarchists to Soviet Russia in what becomes known as the Red Scare deportations of 1919 to 1920. The McKinley assassination also accelerates the development of presidential security protocols. The Secret Service, which had been created in 1865 to combat counterfeiting, is formally tasked with protecting the president. Security procedures become much more rigorous, with agents screening visitors, limiting public access, and maintaining constant surveillance of potential threats. The international response to McKinley's murder includes renewed calls for cooperation against anarchist terrorism. An international anti-anarchist conference in Rome had already been held after previous assassinations, and McKinley's death strengthened support for international police cooperation, information sharing, and joint efforts to suppress anarchist networks. Newspapers across America and Europe rage against anarchists and political refugees. The Daily Mail in London declares that there is a difference between national hospitality and harbouring national pests. American editorials demand stricter immigration controls and harsh punishment for anyone advocating political violence. The debate over free speech intensifies. Should philosophical anarchists, people who promote anarchist ideology without directly participating in violence, be imprisoned or deported? One newspaper suggests jailing them for a year to cool off and make them considerably more cautious in the use of their words. This tension between protecting free speech and preventing terrorism remains unresolved to this day. The anarchist movement itself splinters after McKinley's assassination. Some anarchists celebrate Czolgosz as a martyr and hero. Others, horrified by the backlash and realizing that propaganda of the deed is counterproductive, renounce terrorism and focus on building mass movements for social change. Ironically, Czolgosz achieved the exact opposite of his intended goal. Rather than inspiring revolutionary consciousness in the masses, the assassination triggered revulsion and a massive government crackdown that nearly destroyed the anarchist movement in America. The propaganda of the deed proved to be propaganda for the state, providing justification for surveillance, deportation, and suppression of dissent. The mapping of William McKinley's assassination reveals the climax of the first wave of modern terrorism, the anarchist campaign of bombings and assassinations that terrorized Europe and America from the 1880s through the 1920s. McKinley's death marked the moment when this wave of violence reached its highest American target and triggered reforms that fundamentally changed how democracies protect their leaders. The assassination also demonstrates the futility of individual acts of terrorism in achieving political change. Czolgosz believed that killing McKinley would somehow inspire the working class to revolution, but instead it united Americans in grief and anger against anarchism. The masses he claimed to champion rejected his violence and supported the government crackdown that followed. The medical tragedy that killed McKinley, the unseen pancreatic damage that couldn't be diagnosed or treated in 1901, parallels the Garfield assassination 20 years earlier. Both presidents survived the initial shooting, but died from complications that modern medicine could have prevented. Both assassinations exposed the limits of medical knowledge and accelerated the adoption of new surgical techniques and diagnostic tools. The security failures that allowed Czolgosz to approach McKinley with a concealed weapon led directly to the development of modern presidential protection. The assumption that crowds provided natural security proved fatally wrong. The lack of weapons screening, the minimal Secret Service presence, and the president's insistence on maintaining public accessibility all contributed to an easily preventable tragedy. The parallels between the anarchist wave of terrorism and modern terrorism are striking. The belief that spectacular violence will inspire political change, the use of soft targets to spread fear, the radicalization of isolated individuals through ideology, and the government response of surveillance and deportation all echo current debates about counterterrorism. The question of how to deal with extremist ideology while protecting free speech remains as relevant today as in 1901. How do democracies combat philosophical anarchists or ideological extremists without becoming authoritarian themselves? The balance between security and liberty that Roosevelt and Wilson struggled with continues to challenge us over a century later. Leon Czolgosz wanted to be remembered as a hero who struck a blow against tyranny. Instead, he's remembered as a deluded assassin who killed a popular president and triggered a crackdown that nearly destroyed the movement he claimed to champion. His act of propaganda of the deed became propaganda for everything he opposed. William McKinley deserved better than to die from a preventable assassination that security precautions could have stopped and medical care could have treated. His death marks not just the end of a presidency, but the end of an era when American presidents could walk among their people without fear. The price of that innocence was paid in presidential blood on a September afternoon in Buffalo, killed by a man who believed murder was a shortcut to utopia.